And we went through the various kings. Who believes that a wood nymph would tell them, predict the future? Yeah. One thing he did though, the wood nymph did say, hey, you Romans want to kill each other all the time. Let's have them do rituals and the gods, and they'll be so busy praying all the time they won't be killing each other. Where did they go and kidnap all the women from? What area? Yeah. Savon, yeah. So let's get ready. Did we get discipline? And all of this basically relates to how do we keep, Romans were so warlike, how do we keep them from killing each other all the time? The reality, though, a little bit different. Let's get to the classes then. There are two classes. The patricians and the plebeians. The patricians and the plebeians. So these are the nobility. Nobility in this context means usually it's inherited. So it's an aristocracy that's passed on. They're the ones who have the land. So they're the ones who loan money. They're the creditors. Every single place we have, Sumeria, Egypt, Greece, and now Rome, there's the issue of debtors and creditors. And they ran the government. They're the ones who picked the kings. If the kings were elected, kings weren't necessarily hereditary. They were kind of voted upon by the patricians. Hereditary monarchy was kind of unheard of, but will be brought back with Alexander. And then the Romans would follow with the emperors, the imperators. The plebeians are everybody else. And by the way, do you like this wonderful picture of the classes? Do you feel like you're there? Yeah. And you notice there's one we're not included, and that's slaves. Plebeians. So this is common man. Now, common does not mean like average, like a mediocre. Common means of common birth, not nobility. That's what common means. In fact, we just talked about this in U.S. history. The age of the common man were people of, they weren't born of wealth. Everybody. And then they're the ones who had lots and lots and lots of debt. Where are you going? Throwing the pin away, okay. And almost no rights, they couldn't run for office, but they're the ones who make the vast majority of the population, except for slaves on the bottom. And there's going to be almost constant and continuous slave rebellions. One thing about any slave society with slaves, the overriding fear of the slave owners, slave rebellion. So, these are the two governments, patricians and plebes. Now, patricians really push this idea on the plebes. Act like this. Respect authority. Whose authority? Exactly. Mine over you. It's telling the plebeians to not resist, to accept where you're at. It's a way to control people. So, and then how do the patricians live? Did they live like this? Oh, no. Life of luxury. But they told everyone else, don't complain about your lot in life. That's the way it's supposed to be. Okay, there's somebody waving a shoe outside. Okay, good. So here is a patrician manor house, and you start seeing these around 200. Yeah, the guy out there was waving a shoe.
Is this shoe code?
I don't know, but that can't be a coincidence. I lose my video. Reptoids, shapeshifters. Now, we see this with the usually inner courtyard, mosaics, very normally decorated. If you go to Pompeii, you see these wonderful manors, go there and see them just beautifully decorated. So this is the style they live. For the average Roman, either they lived in a hovel or whatever might be at home, or this is the poor life they lived, stacked up on top of each other. And with the new arch they got from the Etruscans, they could get up to about 5 stories high. These buildings, it's hard to get much higher than that, not only for the weight of the construction. This is an earthquake zone too, but also how do you get stuff up 5 floors? So there's limits to it. In fact, you're really not going to see much bigger than 5 to 7 stories until you have what? Stills, and then once you have stills, electricity, elevators. But
There's no stairs in it. Just slopes, I think, not the stairs.
well, stairs you can only go so much and carry stuff. Huh?
That's why you have a lot of sleeps.
No, these are how common people live. So by definition, they're not going to have slaves. In fact, they're on the edge of being slaves. And this shows how cramped, crowded together. Did have a common cistern, even though there would be some places with running water. I told you about pipes would be lead, of course. And how do you get rid of your trash or other things you might have that are waste?
Go out on the street.
So look out below. And so with that, and then there'd be pigs and various things roaming the streets to clean up the mess. But there would be sewers would be open. There would be sewers. They would come through and clean the streets, but those are for the bigger towns. So let's get to the next king then. Servius, in fact, let me go backtrack just a little bit and I'll come back to him. So we're going through it's always considered to be the 7 kings of Rome. I'm to eventually get there. So Romulus, and then we got Tarquin, who was killed because he was too Etruscan. And now we have Servius, and then we'll finish with Tarquin the Proud. And Servius, oh, we're getting there.
Wow, we got way ahead.
Yeah. I think we skipped a few years.
I think we skipped a few chapters.
Okay, a couple things about Servius. He would organize this loose system of how they pick kings and kings and leaders into what's going to be called, we look back at today, the Serbian Constitution. And the Constitution, that is a written document of the laws of the land, showing the laws of the land. I was trying to say laws of the land and the form of government, but the big thing is the laws. It was not yet called a constitution yet. Constitutions would come and go, but you'll see it called that because it started being called that by the 1600s, and that would be a big reform of the 18th century. Like, we need a country where all the laws are written down. The closest would be before then would be Britain, but Britain had a series of laws. That's why the U.S. Constitution is such a big thing. Not for the form of government it creates, because the government it creates is pretty, there's some difficulties with it. And you might see them right now. But it was laid out and listed for everybody. But this Constitution lays out this basic idea that the king is on top and the Roman people are on the bottom, but they can pick certain leaders. So they have certain control over the king, and then they pledge their loyalty to the king. And the priesthood on one side, and the priesthood will be very much adjunct to the king, but the one we have to get to would be the Senate. And the Senate would be made up of patricians, and they advise. But the Senate is going to have great power and kind of this mystical power almost. It's a lifetime appointment. But one thing Servius did is the plebeians got a little bit more of a voice in government. They had more control. Just a little bit more voice in government, but not enough to change their lot in life, a lot, but also they would be appointed with the approval of the gods. Who knew that? The priest. How do we know that? Because the people would approve, because the gods would direct them. And Servius, he would be, that would be a model of the coin named after him. He, though, was walking down the street near the end of his life, and he saw a man walking away from him, and his head was on fire. And flames were shooting up 20 or 30 feet above his head while his head was on fire. Now, I would argue that's fatal, but not only that, he saw that as an omen, that he must adopt his most favorite slave and prepare him to become king. which makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, who's going to be upset by this? His sons. And so his sons are going to murder. His sons are going to murder the slave to make sure that can't happen. And Lucretia, his daughter, well, actually, outside it will be. I'll turn on. His son-in-law would murder the slave, who he named Servius. Again, keep the same name. His son would murder the slave by throwing him down the stairs. Lucretia, this Servius's daughter, was desperate to go be with her husband, who just murdered the slave, former slave now, that she ran over her father, the king, and killed him. So naturally, don't trust omens involving people with their head on fire. And what did that would lead to? Tarquin the Proud. Tarquin had the support of the wealthy. And I would say he was assassinated by his daughter, but it's really not clear if she actually meant to run him over with her carriage or not. All that matters is he's dead. Her husband became considered one of the worst monarchs in history. This is a cartoon book from the 1890s about Roman history, and that's supposed to be Tarquin right there. And kind of the mess and the fighting because of all that going on. Well, he immediately went to war with all his neighbors. He had these massive building projects, built a massive monument to Jupiter, the god of war. He also built a really nice sewer system. But all this money which raised taxes, which put more pressure on the plebeians, also meant more war to get more conquest. He also was involved in stealing any patrician that would not follow him. He would drum up charges against them of treason and steal their land. And then his son, it appears as though it gets a little vague what happened, but the legend is his son would rape one of the nobleman's daughters, and he of course covered it up. His son raped Lucretia was her name. Yes, we have a few Lucretias. Lucretia, in her humiliation, would commit suicide in front of this brand new temple for Jupiter. And that would trigger the Civil War. We have to get rid of this monster, Tarquin the Proud. So the monster, and who would do it? This kind of unknown soldier who was called the dullard, which means the moron. He was considered to be a dolt. All of a sudden, he stepped up and said, we must overthrow the king and replace it with a much more equitable system, and that's Junius Brutus. So Brutus is going to be a very famous name in Roman history. We have two Brutus. See, that's your job.
Brutus.
Huh?
Brutus, the second Brutus, he's a good man. He did do anything to kill Julius Caesar. He was not involved in it.
Except for a few knife wounds. It's actually about 8 Brutuses apart, but still the same name.
Hey, he's more famous.
And he would be what's called the consul. The consul is like the lawgiver, which we'll get to in a second, and he led this revolt. And there would be fighting, a whole series of wars, and eventually Tarquin the Proud would be removed from office. And this was a dramatic moment. They said, we can't have a king anymore. We got to put the phone away. And thus, we have the Roman Republic. Now, if you've ever seen anything Roman, they'll have these letters. And then we keep it all through the empire, too. But these letters mean Senatus Populus Romans, which means essentially become the symbol for the Roman Republic, the SPQR. So whenever you see this, it means the Roman Republic. But when they would get rid of the Republic and have the emperor, they kept this. And they kept the titles of the Roman Republic. So this means Roman Republic. And so, we got this in Roman Republic. I won't make you know the Senate Populus Romanus, but that's just where that comes from. You ever see that in Roman history? SPQR. So, what we have then is a system of government and government officials called the magistrate. And the symbol of the magistrate is going to be the fash. And there's the fash right here. And the fash is trying to show the strength of a republic. If we just have a king, aka one of these rods. So a fash is a bundle of rods. If you just have one, you can snap it. But a bundle, all together as one Rome, strong. And this is going to be really important. When they fight Carthage, the mighty Carthage, the empire of Carthage had that was rich all over the Mediterranean, but they were all fighting for themselves. Romans were fighting for Rome all together. This was the symbol of Roman power. Now, at times of war or emergency, they would add an axe to that, saying that the government officials, we to this act, the consul, had the power of capital punishment in times of emergency. And so wherever Romans would go, they would carry this. So one of the two consuls would carry this, and their police were called lictors. And lictors would go through, and they would arrest people. They would be the police for the government of this new Roman Republic. And there would be lictors all the way to the end of the Byzantine Empire in 1453. And that's a symbol of the Roman Republic. And they were basically, for the most part, pretty corrupt police. But wherever Romans would go, they would have the fash lead them, and this would be a symbol of Roman authority. And so when anybody would try to come back to the idea of Roman greatness, they would come back to this, the fash. And so you'll see it here. Here are Rome. This is supposed to be a picture of, this is Africanus after they defeated Carthage and being led through, and you see all the fascists. And as a fascist of many states, this is the back of an old dime, a United States dime. And what is it? A fash. In fact, on the US coin, it's going to be this beautiful mountain valley, but also have this saying, e pluribus unum. Does anybody know what that means? It's on money today. Out of many, one. Individual states, weak. But all the states together, you can't break apart. The union is strong. So a lot of people would follow this. In fact, on the anniversary of Columbus arriving to the New World in 1492, in 1892, they did a thing to kind of celebrate it, and there was a contest to show what's the best kind of government to promote all these new, or the governments that would create the most rights for people, aka a republic, which is very Roman, the Roman Republic. The United States is a republic. There was a contest to do that. And a guy named Walter Bellamy wrote this thing, you might have heard of it, because by state law now we must say it every day. What do we say every day? That's by state law. It used to be once a week, now it's every day. That was passed in 2021. The Pledge of Allegiance was about republics, Roman republics. So it's a lot of Roman illusion. This came back of the dime after that, because Rome had a republic. And the Pledge of Allegiance went like this. I pledge allegiance to the flag and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You notice what's missing? So first off, there's no to the United States because there's supposed to be all republics. That's the best system of government. That's what they thought. And then they added, because of the Cold War and the U.S. is not godless communist, they added under God when Eisenhower was president. But here's the thing: Roman Republic. And how did Romans salute? Bellamy made it up. Nobody knew how Romans, no idea. So Bellamy made up a Roman salute that you would do during the Pledge of Allegiance. He didn't know what to do. Made it up. Purely made up something. And what was it? Well, this was a pledge to show fidelity, and so you would do this to the flag. That's the Roman salute. Not a big deal, right? Wow. 20th century. when Benito Mussolini would create a right-wing political movement in Italy, wanting to bring back the glory of Rome, he adopted the fash as their symbol, thus fascism. And if you look at this picture of Mussolini, do you see it? The fash. You want to see Mussolini? It's just that came from the United States. That's Mussolini. Anybody want to guess another fascist government? So that's the Nazi salute comes from the Roman Republic, and the Walter Bellamy just kind of guessing the way it was. So, yes, the U.S. would do. They'd all go be like, I pledge allegiance to the flag until 1942.
So like, you know.
And then they changed it to this. Why 42? I can think of nothing going on at that time.
Nothing.
By the way, isn't it ironic, though? That's where that fascist salute comes from. It was just Bellamy trying to come up with something to show the government that would guarantee the most rights for people, and ironically would be a government dedicated to take away rights. Hey, fascism is back on the rise today, so yay. Okay, that actually makes me very sad. But you're the young ones. I'm old, so you guys are wow. All right, so let's get to Republican government. Republican government. Now, what does Republican mean? Government by representation. Everybody write that down. Even if you already know it, write it down just to make me feel better. Government by representation. So decisions will be made by representatives. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean they're chosen by some kind of process of voting, but they represent the people. And there was somewhat of a vote. Now, remember, a democracy is majority rule on everything. Republic, representatives make these decisions. And so here is a very easy to follow map of the magistrate. You got it? Example arrows and okay. I don't understand that one either. I just like those. So let's get down to the forms of government. First up, the permanent position not appointed by the people are the Senate. 300 leading patricians, and they would advise. But what did advise mean? I mean, they kind of, in a way, wrote the laws. The Senate had great authority. Advice from the Senate meant a lot. And the Senate would last all the way to the end of Rome. There'd be a Senate. Even when there was an empire, there'd be a Senate. Now, chosen by the various groups they called tribes would be councils. And councils would be the most important. And what country, or what polis, had two kings? Sparta. So this is a lot like Sparta. Two councils. In fact, the whole idea, there are two councils. One would hold the fashion, the other one would. Whoever's holding it is technically in power on that day. And they would do this at war. That's when they fought Hannibal. They go back and forth. One day he'd hold it to being general, the next day the other general would be. So you better hope it's that day it's the good general when the battle's being fought.
No, wait, but it's odd days.
Odd days? Yes.
Two of them, there's 7 days in a week. One of them's gonna have.
And they did have 7 days a week, so it would be, they just kept rotating. So they're the executive. They carry out the laws. The lictors work for them. Next, the praetors were more like judges, and the praetors are the ones who, same deal, they'd be chosen by the various tribes, and they would have the responsibility of law giving. The censors, they also had a couple different names for the censors, but they kept all the records, organization, they did public work, they made the buildings. I mean, censors had immense power. Censors had immense power. And then we're not going to go through every single one. Quaestors were finance. Yeah, that's the tax collector, big money. And then, if there's an emergency, the republic can appoint a dictator. And the dictator will take power as a full, complete dictator with absolute power until the emergency is done. How long will the emergency last? Most of the time, the dictator will give up power. What happens if the dictator doesn't? Or says, hey, why don't you vote me dictator for life? That happened a number of times. Most famously, the last one, Caesar, leading directly to the emperor. And so that's the basic system they have. And there was 20 tribes in this tribal assembly, and they had the vote, and this should remind you a little bit of Athens. Each tribe had one vote. So imagine these are the tribes. Well, the patricians have very few members. The plebes, a lot of people. It's a little like Athens. So basically, there's more power for the patricians. All the tribes would come together and vote, and since there's significant more plebeians, their vote was less weighted. By the way, that should remind you of something within our country right now, the United States. We have a situation now where we are divided up into 50 tribes, aka states. And when they pick presidents, some of those states have more power or more votes than other states. Who picks the president? The Electoral College. Who do the people vote for? Electors. People do not vote for president. And so they vote for electors. And we have Electoral College where what kind of states have more votes? Smaller states have a big advantage. Montana has more votes per person than California. And no one lives here. So we have an element, by the way, that's that is the remnant of the magistrate building where they met. So what's going to happen though? Are the plebes are going to have enough? These small farmers have been mistreated. And secession means rise. So the rise of the plebes. These small farmers they're going to be the ones who are going to be soldiers. They're about fighting. And Rome is fighting all the time. They're fighting against all their neighbors in central Italy. And as they're gone, their family members need to go into debt to survive. What happens if you go into debt and can't pay it back? Or their husbands come home and they don't get as much loot as they hoped and they can't pay back their debt. They lose their land, and there was debt slavery. If you could not pay your debt, it goes into slavery. Remember, the same thing happened in Sumeria. Well, after nearly 100 years of this in the New Republic, the soldiers had enough and they mutinied. They literally walked out of Rome, set up a wooden stockade, and said, we're not going to fight unless you get rid of the system that's cheating us as we go and fight. You got to forgive our debts. And their leader would be a guy named Cincinnatus. He was one of the soldiers and a plebeian. Now, the Romans are known for their harsh treatment of those who rebel. The problem was the soldiers who normally would put down the rebellion are the ones rebelling. And it worked. It worked. They rebelled and got more rights, and eventually would get rid of debt slavery. The problem getting rid of debt slavery was, well, now the patricians are like, we need more slaves. And that will directly lead to more conquest, which will lead to the end of the republic. By the way, that's supposedly them coming together. An agreement. The patricians came to agreement. We're not going to get to that. But they created what's called the Tribune of the Plebes. And this would be a new office created. And they would protect the plebeians. And there'd be 5, eventually 10 members who would be called the Tribune of the Plebes. And they had the power to veto any law of the Republic. And they're sacrosanct, meaning they can't be touched. So the rest of the government, the councils, the praetors, etc., could not touch the tribune. So this became a real powerful figure. And they're going to keep this tribune even in the Republic. This is a symbol of rights of the people. Now, the people still have really tough lives, miserable conditions, horrible food, fast food though. And yes, they had something like pizza. But pizza's not yet invented. So, this is a tribute, and they wear these kind of funny conical hats right here. And they're making basically the grievances of the people. And my assumption is the people must involve this bull. I'm not sure what's going on there, but I would say that bull has some problems. So with that, one more thing. During this time then, if we are going to guarantee people's rights, we need laws written down. And this will lead to what's called the 12 tables in 450 BC. The 12 tables. And this is going to be civil law. Now, what was the law from Babylon? The code. The code of Hammurabi. There might be some influence on this because we have some of the same ideas. But here are the 12 tables, and these would be posted all over, and these are the laws that everybody must follow. Now, one thing, they're going to be pretty pro-patrician. Why? They're the ones writing the laws. And how did it become this way? Lots and lots of bribes. Because who had to be bribed to get 12 laws, 12 tables of laws that were pro-patrician? Who? Yeah. So they co-opted the tribune. The tribunes are plebeians. They don't have much money. They gave the tribunes money, and all of a sudden these laws passed. Can you believe bribery would happen? That seems to go against that whole self-discipline thing. And so here's some of the laws. No, you didn't write this down. Just go and take a look at them. All right. So, you're called to court, you must go or get a witness or be captured. So, to a witness, you have 30 days to pay a debt. After 30 days, you're put in chains. After 60 days, you're sold to slavery. So it doesn't really favor the debtors, right? Children with deformities? Yeah, I know. Parents can sell their children into slavery if you need more money. Who's going to need more money? Plebeians. Yeah. So this is a pretty nasty one. Women must have a male guardian to accompany them. Patrician, fatherly. You're responsible for roads and trees. Like this. If a person insults or gossips, they shall be clubbed to death. Women can cry or slap their cheeks, or slap cheeks as funerals. It's a very common warning to do this. So women can't do that in public. I guess men can. You notice no marriage between plebeians and patricians. Fire, chains, whipping, same injury as committed. Public humiliation, banishment, slavery, and death. If you hurt somebody, the same injury would happen, or you're going to be banished or put to death or enslaved. So, last thing for today, the Gauls. We don't know what happened to a lot of this. The 12 tables survived, but the Gauls swept in from the north, defeating the Roman armies, kind of surprising them, and they destroyed Rome. And in it, burnt all the records. They burnt all the records. So we have no idea. What I just told you is legend. There'd be 20 years of disruption, and in that process, the Romans would finally defeat the Etruscans, and that's when we're going to get to the Punic Wars. And so, on that note, the rest of the period, work on the map. How many questions you want for the quiz?
Let's do like 40.
One question. 41 questions. Okay, good. Okay, there we
No
go.
short ID.
Wait, no, 40.
How many short IDs?
No short ID, 100 magic.
Okay, 100 short IDs, no matching? That's pure organic, that must be so good for it.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll take out your map, so to get to work.
I think because you have to like this. Buzzing. I don't even like non-GMO. I feel like it makes the plant stronger and it makes me stronger.
My mask, the left ear thing is like much smaller than the right, like my left ear is just
Oh.
now.
You can stretch out. Wait, if it's like that bad, it's just no bad.
Yeah, this one is just kind of.
I just like selling this for a while. You just like never use that feel it.
Steve Danes count.
You gotta go in.
Yeah, no, it's still like clambered, but
That's so weird.
I think this one is just like.
I think I just need to go in.
Yeah,
That's so weird.
because the right one's stretched.
Mm-hmm.
On the bus,
That's
you get
really
into
weird.
Jit Kim. What I would the always crazy.
Goals.
They like voting you down.
Oh, so they're counts.
Yeah. Well, eventually, it's the same.
If everybody wants a very good map,
Because, they're gonna love that.
my first question is, what's it worth to you? Secondly, does anybody want a really good map?
Oh, they
Yes.
were.
Oh. Good.
The French invaded Italy, that's.
The French actually want something.
Wait, the French actually did something sweet.
Our entire military copies of the French.
Like Napoleon did something for a while until he decided to invade Russia.
As far as I know, the French won World War One.
They did end World War II.
They did, even that was a little more difficult.
And they were on both sides of World War II. They were Vichy France and France. So technically,
Vichy was
either way,
neutral.
hey, it was technically a separate country.
The thing about poor France was their army was very good in World War II.
Yeah.
Their generals, fossils, yes.
Hey, the wall almost rigged.
Hey,
Okay.
Why is this their first mistake every single time?
go to the,
Oh, it's
To
a
build a
battle?
super base,
permanent
that can be
flight
avoided.
yeah.
But then, what was the one with?
Because it works.
Massachusetts.
Chases.
Yeah, you're right.
Okay, thank you.
We got, in the three big rebellions in that area, we got Bacon's, and we got Shays, and then we got, and then 7 years after that, Whiskey Rebellion.
Oh yes. Honestly, Julius, you should come back. You know, if you was never really killed, he's still alive today. That's my theory.
What's that?
Like
He's
Elvis
teaching us
Presley?
Western sin.
Maybe you are Julius Caesar.
Are you Elvis Presley?
Spawn everything. Well, if I start singing,
Come on.
Where's Persia?
where's Persia?
Yeah. Not really.
All this, they're all over the country. That's why I can't rely on
No. Yeah. Okay. Not really good in the Euro category. What's that? Eurasia.
I'm just fading up, yes.
Same thing. Eurasia.
Do you prove yourself right?
Yeah.
You showed Iraq is there. But now, it wasn't Iraq then.
Okay. Oh, never mind. Yeah.
Do you know Biden more drugs? I don't.
No. Doesn't mean
Huh?
I don't know. It's not.
You don't like it, that's everything you need.
I want to use that.
songs.
Except this.
Where is the new wave?
You want
The new wave river?
Damn you.
Damn it.
Doesn't ring a bell.
Not like it's all, well, it is, but it's all people.
They were-
It's not so good, but it's not late. We have everything else in there. Okay. Then they would make that part of their lives. But they invaded this document, which is not media. They invaded there, which was kind of stupid. They didn't know what else to do. They just kept invading.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, well, we need more gold and credibility, and people are getting restless. Let's invade someplace. I'll tell you the story when Ptolemy tried to invade here.
Where's Pompey?
Pompeii, just south where Naples is now. Just south of Rome.
Yeah, I didn't see that. Yeah.
And Naples is the place where I saw somebody get hit by a car, and everybody on the street and the car got out and yelled at the pedestrian. So, Naples is an interesting place.
My mom went to Denmark.
Yeah.
And when she left the airport, she saw over 2,000
In Denmark?
Yeah, it was like the first 10 minutes she was there.
That's so weird, 'cause like Denmark's Denmark is one of the cleanest countries with the highest standard of living and the happiest people in the world.
It was in the
Much higher.
It was in the 80s.
Not that long ago, Denmark.
Is this the Rhine?
Denmark has a much higher standard of living than the US.
Is this the,
Much happier people.
it's like in Germany and France?
Of course, yeah. I think that's something to do with the fact
It's
that
not here, never mind.
getting those sons who
No,
are so
no,
happy with
no.
their son and so overjoyed.
I should know that. Nah, no, that was bad. As soon as I said it, I was like, wait, it was here.
I believe that.
We still have the phone. They still have to.
Yeah.
Every day you walk that, the bells like, gets 40 hours.
I know.
And
Yeah.
no one's
It does that every year.
Yeah.
I don't know how those things are. You don't even see it. It's in the announcement. And they just the time.
Oh,
Oh, really?
I was carrying the book around. I don't know why I said that.
Yeah. I thought you had a key.
I think I just set it down when I was looking for
It's a
something.
little
Got it.
box.
Yeah, I wonder how they can kind of.
If you can't find anything on the map, I'll point to it.
Patricians and Police, like in Britain, isn't it?
Haven's Wall right there. Right there. So there's two of them.
Oh,
See here?
yeah.
And the originally they go here, and then they advance a little bit further around.
Oh,
The
okay.
foot before, because it's a little bit narrower.
Okay.
That wall is never really a true, like we would consider a wall. Hadrian's Wall is a stone wall that's still there, all the way across. Some of it's starting to get degraded, but it's really, it's walk about 3 miles of it. It's between Scotland and England. So if you look at this map here, it wouldn't be there.
Wyoming.
But Hadrian's Wall, it's a pretty desolate area too. It's cold, the wind never quits.
That side end.
Really?
Side. Roughly.
Yeah.
I just looked up Roman lines, and I'm at Home Depot.
Roman lines, I know, but lines means Roman walls. And what they did is they built along the Rhine River, then across here along the Danube. And that just means fortified walls to keep the barbarians out.
It's just a city.
By the way, walls don't work. They just go right over. Walls, you know what walls do? Walls say, look how strong we are, we built a wall. Zama, right there by Carthage. Where the elephants were beaten, or Hannibal. Hannibal would die in Lydia, or Pergamum, yeah. Elysia? Elysia. That's where the Gauls, Caesar would be. It's a pretty amazing story. But not a decisive battle. Hey, what are we doing tomorrow then? Quick Punic Wars. Maybe I'll talk about the Raven, and then decisive battle.
Are you gonna do it as games at least?
Huh? I'll put it up on Teams.
Yeah.
Or is it on Netflix?
There are, it's actually battles, there's some good ones.
What?
It's more modern. These ones here. And they don't quite know. No, that's good.
Where the Roman lines at?
Where do I want them? Or where were they? Because I would like them around Ellen.
I think we need them.
Duh. So the lines go along the Rhine and then along the Danube. And they weren't really, I mean, there were some walls, but basically just fortifications all along there.
Do you know where these? I can find these two.
It's on is right here. And Alicia. Here. And what's the other one? Cana, that's the biggest victory over the Romans. Right here. The battle there. Hannibal defeated the Romans. So I'll see you tomorrow.
Where's Zama?
Zama by Carthage. Gives you an idea how vassals empires were.
Pretty big, yeah.
And I know everything took longer, but they still went.
Yeah.
They're pretty amazing.
Are you gonna get it?
I'll do. I took them home to finish up the multiple choice. I don't know about how. Yeah, I know. I'm such a terrible
Are we
person.
talking about lizard people today?
Huh?
Are we talking about lizard people today?
Yeah, we've already watched a little bit on Apollo, the Apollo moon landing, but the Fox News had a show on Fox TV had one. It was really popular. About that? And he's on YouTube.
He said he was wrong for that though.
No, yeah, more people believe that the Apollo moon landing was fake than did in the 90s when it really hit.
She's busy.
It's a lost sound.
Reptoids, people! It's Reptoid Day, and we're not going to do Apollo 11.
Reptoid?
Reptoid. You know, what did you say?
I don't know what reptoid is.
That's exactly what a reptoid would say. Wait, let me see your eyes. Did you smell like something go? A third eyelid? Huh? What would a reptoid do? I'm looking at everyone's eyes.
So I guess,
Look for a third eyelid. Are your eyes? It's brown, bluish green.
Oh, the smolder it is. Yes, yes, it's like way better than the
They go over
Oh,
the
you can-
Wow,
yeah,
I get one every day. So it's not giving them to you.
They're gas.
Look at me. You have third eyelid.
I don't know, I've never had it before.
Does anybody have any scars? Reptoid. Does anybody care about anybody else? Reptoid. Does anybody not care about anybody else?
That's so cool.
Reptoid.
Every time you order that, it's like, oh, this is perfect.
Is anybody wearing orange? Reptoid. Anyone not wearing orange? Reptoid. Let me think about it, because we have a test today.
Okay.
So you can have your bookmark out. If you want that thing
I'm
out.
like to like all the coworkers, but how much your daughter loves.
I'll spend about 300. Maybe he wants 300.
He doesn't like 300, he has 300. Nick is the same as me. He's like,
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, I don't know.
Well, I think It's like
All right,
So then, like, as
I have bad news for the Apollo 11 front, and I believe this does involve reptoids. So I was going to show you part of Fox TV had a thing in the 90s, and it was a massive hit. It kind of energized the obvious fact that humans have never landed on the moon, right?
Yes.
We know that's true.
There was
But-
no dust.
It was a huge, yes, because there's no dust anywhere.
Also, how can you?
There's no dust here, let alone on the moon. And so because of that, any dust, reptoids.
Wire flag, reptoid, hollow earth, through poles. They won't let us visit Antarctica.
Wait, Calvin, are you a moon cheese freezer?
No,
Wait a minute,
I'm
wait a
like
minute.
a hollow earth believer.
Calvin is on some kind of loop, because that means that somebody's broadcasting through you. But I was going to show that just part of it, because it was a big deal when it came on. In fact, it was such a big deal a little bit later, they had alien autopsy, which, who's in for alien autopsy? It changed my life, but it's not on, actually, it was on YouTube, it was just a show they had on Fox TV 28 years ago or something like that. It's not there anymore. Reptoids. So I'm gonna see if I can't find a copy in other places. I'll talk to my reptoid friends and see if we can. But we're gonna talk about reptoids now. And one other conspiracy, a couple other conspiracies. That's what I'm gonna do with the reptoid conspiracy, because we all know the world is being controlled by shape-shifting reptilian creatures. And there's a lot of evidence. What's the main part of this evidence? It's because everybody in power insists they're not a reptilian. That can only mean one thing. Reptilian. Because what would a reptilian say? I'm not a reptilian.
See, you know, if you go up in stage, you know, that would mean you make reptilian.
Oh, then you're clearly a reptilian.
Mr. Parker.
Yes.
But what is your favorite McDonald's character?
You know, I've always been partial to the hamburger.
Hamburger?
Yeah.
Oh.
Mr. Partridge,
Yes.
when are